We appreciate you guys being here today. We've had some great discussions, and we have our cleanup hitter here today to talk about one-man band sports production. Join me in welcoming Mo Goyal from Evertz.
Great, thank you. All right. Thanks for the introduction, and I hopefully will make this interesting to keep you for the last session here. What I'm going to talk about is the one-man band sports production, what that means, how we got to that spot. Let me first talk about myself. My name is Mo. I've been working with Evertz for about 14, 15 years. For those that are not familiar with the company Evertz, we're a manufacturer of hardware and software solutions from carrying signals from acquisition all the way to distribution. One of the elements that we're working on more recently, and what I'm sort of participating in, is the live media space and how do we innovate and look at ways to get content, tell better stories out to the platforms easier. So one of the big things here is that content is always king, okay? And the crown jewels are live sports. And that's why companies like these ones here are investing a lot into that. If you look at some of the ratings, some of the top out of the top 50, about 40 of the shows are live sporting events. So they draw viewership, they generate revenue, and that's really what keeps a lot of these companies, your traditional players, going. And in fact, in terms of the revenues that the leagues are getting from these companies is enormous, and it continues to grow. One of the things that's starting to happen, though, and it's been a sort of an evolution, is how viewers are consuming sports content, okay? Individuals of my vintage continue to watch sports broadcasts on the big screen, on the LCDs, plant themselves down in front of the television and watch it. However, there is a shift in terms of how that sporting content is being consumed by others. And you're starting to see it moving towards a streaming platform, whether it's on your phone and tablet. What's interesting, though, and I think a lot of people have this sense that, well, in fact, if we look at it, the age group that I'm in, that's really the only people that are interested in sports, and that's not necessarily true. We still have an interest in sports. The bond that you have with sports is still there. Whether you're a Gen X or a millennial, there's still a strong interest in sports and watching sports, because there's nothing like being part of that event, talking to your friends about that event and experiencing that event. So we see that their interest is there. However, they're shifting from the big ones that were always presented to them to now looking at other alternatives. And in fact, one element that's missing in here is esports. Okay, so that's another space that's starting to grow. So there's not so much a shift in terms of people not interested in these events. It's more of a shift in the type of events that they watch and how they consume it. And what we'll start to see here is in that shift away from watching it on your traditional platforms to now being more interactive on the social media side of things and everything else. So what does that mean? How does that create, what are the challenges does that pose today's sports production? Well, first and foremost, it's about the cost of getting these rights, okay? One of the studies that was done recently here has shown over a 12-year period the increasing cost of accumulating or acquiring those rights, all right? So we see that in 2006 to 2018, for example, the Premier League, the cost of getting those rights to distribute, or the content rights, has increased enormously. I think the number is like $7.7 billion is what BT and Sky paid for the current set of rights. Rights themselves are actually starting to become the more significant number or revenue generator for the sports leagues themselves, okay? Up to 2018, gate revenues was probably the leading contributor to the sports revenues, but now media rights, okay? And in fact, that's going to continue to grow based on a study that was done by PwC here, that the media rights will continue to grow at about 5% annually over the next 5 to 10 years. Now, the other challenges for those big companies is not so much just the cost of getting these digital rights or these content rights, but it's the new players, okay? The competition's getting a little bit more busier. you now have what they call the FANGs: Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, and Google getting into the game. Okay? And in some cases, directly competing for those rights. In other cases, augmenting the already existing offerings for the traditional linear broadcaster by presenting another platform to present that content. So in some cases, working in parallel with the existing TV broadcasters. The NFL is a great example where the Thursday night broadcast, in which they've given it to the NBC or NFL Network, they've also given access to YouTube last year to present live games in parallel. All right? So they see a trend in which viewership is moving from one to the other, and they're trying to monetize it as well. And you can see the other platforms are either going directly against those big broadcasters, or they're providing an alternative stream. One of the other big concerns is getting value for the content they already own. So I was at Sky last week, and one of the big things was they're trying to add value to the services they currently have. Okay? Sky is a very big brand. They own a ton of different properties. However, Sky Sports is also part of a larger Sky platform in which they deliver content on the linear side and the non-linear side, whether it's through on-demand streaming services. But they are charging for these services. And what they want to make sure is they're adding value for that experience to the end user. So if I turn on to the Premier match on the Monday night, the big match, it's a full production with commentary, full graphics, and everything else. But they want to still have that same experience for that cycling match in which they may only have 10, 50,000 viewers, right? Because they want to ensure that they show value to using this platform to watch those sports, okay? So one of them is basically, one of the other driving factors is how do I add that value without adding the overhead of doing that? And in Sky's case, they've got 9 studios in which they run through, but these are very expensive studios. They're going to be the $1 million studios. They have 20 different people running in there, and we'll go into what a production looks like. That's a very costly exercise for very little return. So they're looking at new innovative ways to deliver that content while still maintaining the brand of their service that they're offering. Perform is a group that's running the platform, the DAZN platform. And in this case, they're looking at consistency across their offerings. So in Japan, they paid something like 210 million yen, or billion yen, for the services to produce the J League 1, 2, and 3, which is their football league in Japan. And what they're doing right now is they're offering the production service for the OTT platform for the J1 league. But now they want to offer the services for the J2 and J3 because they see an opportunity to monetize that content that they own. However, they want to make sure it's consistently done in a manner that is consistent across, that's similar to their J1 production. If you look across Japan, the level of skill set varies. If you're in Osaka or if you're in Tokyo, the skill set is pretty even. But you get outside of those big centers, the content or the production crew that you may get may not be the same quality that you would get out of Osaka and Tokyo. So you want to make sure you get a consistency across that production. And that's the other element they want to do, is make sure they have a consistent look across their basically diverse range of production. So obviously the big thing is, how do I reduce my cost? How do I make things efficient? And how do I continue to deliver quality services, okay? So the objective here is to provide a value-add service. And that means adding graphics, replay, generating highlights, potentially adding commentary to every service that they want to provide, whether it's the big matches or even the smaller ones. The other element is to collapse the production groups into smaller groups. So instead of rolling out a team of 20 individuals to run a production, how do I get that down to 4? How do I get that down to 1? And essentially lowering the cost of that production and generating more revenue, all right? So if we look at today's typical production, you have a producer, you have a technical director, you have a video engineer, audio engineers, graphics, replay operators, editors, support engineers, a big crew, okay? And in fact, some of the facilities that you would find these things are going to be well over $1 million in terms of that, okay? So that's a great deal of investment, and you want to make sure you use that investment wisely, right? So for the big events, roll out the big trucks, roll out the big studios, produce that because that's the high revenue generators. For the other stuff, that model does not work. How do I generate it? So one of the things is leveraging what we call collaborative production. And in this case, we're going to talk a little bit about something called Bravo. So in this case, this is built upon Dreamcatcher, which is our IP-based sort of replay production suite of tools. Now, first and foremost, the architecture is built around a collection of processing nodes. And you have software that runs on that. Okay? So in one case, you're not building dedicated hardware to do this. You're leveraging the capacity and the processing of these nodes, which means that if another more powerful node comes available or hardware comes in, I can add that to the collection and just add capacity processing-wise and storage to that system. So there's a meaning, or in this case, I'm now leveraging technology we find in data centers to provide this service. Signals will come in, we allocate software services on this platform to then produce the signals going out. So what does that look like? Well, in a basic function, you've got camera signals that will come in, going into the cluster, and then you start to feed out the various parts. So in a traditional full-size production environment, I'm taking my signals coming in, and I'm going to feed that to the production element or the replay element of that production. That feeds into your traditional production workflow. You got the large ones. So or events like the Super Bowl or golf championships will use this model. And this is a large scale. But because we're a software element, we can add to this dynamic and now offer a simplified production environment. Okay? And what does that production environment look like? Well, it basically is bringing all these services that we find within the production environment into a singular interface in which one person can drive it, two people can drive it, or 4 or 5. It scales up and down based on the production needs. So what you've got here is essentially a software package that allows you to do your full audio and video mixing, the replay capabilities, the ability to add dynamic graphics, handle real-time data feeds, and manage real-time metadata, okay, to simplify the overall production workflow to allow you to run this as a one-band person or one-band production. So if we get into a little bit of the screenshots here, this is kind of the top element. And one of the key elements here is that it's about the UI. It's allowing anybody to operate this, because that's one way of reducing your cost is I'm going to be able to I want to have an interface that one person can manage. I'm doing a great deal amount of that one person is going to do the video mixing, the audio mixing, the handling of the graphics, and the replay. So the tool set in front of them has to make that happen. So what you see here is an example of the top part of the screen where I've got my audio controls at the top. I've got the traditional start and stop elements there. I have a predefined storyline. So in this case, in my pre-production, if I'm doing an event, I can start to pre-build my stories. If I'm doing a football match and I know certain players are going to be there, I can predefine what those stories are, use metadata to search within my cluster to bring in information about those stories that I want to follow and automatically start creating those clips around that. The second part here is taking the real-time data, right? Nothing life is ever planned, right? So in terms of sports, I may have an idea that today LeBron James is going to go for 40 points. However, there may be another story that comes up. So that real-time feed gives me a glimpse of actually what's happening and ability to adjust the story I'm telling around what's actually happening in the actual event. You got your program preview, the ability to put on the graphics, turn that on, turn that off, keeping your look the same across your different platforms. The other element here is in terms of your actual switching interface. So as you can see here, it's a different way of presenting the video. In a production control room, I've got a multi-viewer wall that shows me all my sources, and then I look down, I've got buttons in terms of those sources and destinations. Here, you combine those two, and you visually see what you're going to switch to. Again, making it easier for anybody to operate this. So I can go program preview, do my take, and look at the different cameras. The other element here is I already have other stories that I've already created. So I already have predefined a graphics package for this. I've already defined what happens when I do a replay. I want a nice animated graphic to come in and go out. In fact, that little lower part is if I wanted to create a replay, I can automatically go back 5 seconds, select the different angles, and it will automatically clip that highlight and make it available. All right? So again, adding value to those production by giving all those tools that I have in a larger production, but bringing that into a smaller scale and allowing you to run it from a one-person environment. The other key element is you've got to fit into the existing workflow, okay? Whether it's the Adobe Creative Cloud, whether it's Final Cut or Avid, all those elements. And that's the other part. You have to seamlessly work within those environments. So for example, if I'm Sky, I don't have to redefine my workflows. I can augment my existing workflows to fit into, to work with Bravo. So if we go back and we look at this, I could see that in this case, some of the other elements I can take advantage of. IP is a big is a big thing that's happening within the production environment. We're moving away from an SDI-based facility to more of an IP. And what that allows us to do is become very flexible in how we handle different productions, okay? And this is a great example of that, where I may, at the start of the day, want to handle a small production. One person shows up, it's going to be a 6-camera morning beach volleyball match, allocate those resources, direct that to the interface, and let an operator go ahead and produce that 6-camera event, stream it to my different platforms, or put that onto another platform later on in the day. One person doing that. Later on, I may want to reconfigure by a schedule my system to now say, you know what, this is probably going to be about a 12 camera environment. I really want to have it to be a little bit more professional looking. I'm going to separate that. I'm going to add another operator to it to handle strictly the replay aspect of it and let the production person focus on the actual production element. So again, scale that system, add the resources we need depending on the event itself. And then when you get to the big event, allocate all your resources into a multi-person production environment again. So scale up, scale down based on the need, taking advantage of the IP infrastructure. Extrapolating that even further is someone like ESPN that says, I've got a cluster in-house. In fact, what I want to do is I want to basically have matches that are happening across the country and have a singular crew manage those productions. So I have an event that happens in the East Coast, my production crew will do that. And then as I get to the central time zone, the same production crew will handle that event. And then as I get into the West Coast, those signals will come across and they'll be able to handle that. So again, leveraging the versatility to be able to scale from a large scale down to one. Okay? So the one-man band production really is all about providing value-add services. It's about adding the graphics, adding the replay component, adding the commentary into the production. For players like Sky or even IMG, this is about taking those world feeds and making them a little bit more, adding value to those ones. These are typically one camera feeds that will come in. So how do I add value? Put a little bit more graphics, add features like replays and highlights to it. Allow me to collapse my production into smaller groups, collaborative teams that I can allocate and handle more events. In Sky's case, they are basically turning away business because of their commitments that they're doing right now. So what they're seeing is we're getting a lot more demands for our studios and our production rooms for these major entertainment productions that we have to turn away because we're allocating them for our services, these sort of smaller, so I have to make a business decision. If I'm able to bring my group into a smaller entity and run it using these tools, then I can take the best of both worlds, provide value for my services, and then take on more business. By leveraging that, a software component onto a DC cluster or a software-defined data center, I can be more efficient and flexible of using my existing infrastructure and people. As we can see, I can shrink down to one person handling a small environment, or I can grow to a major event very easily. And the other element is lowering the cost of that production. Okay? For an incremental amount, I'm adding value. Therefore, I'm basically taking advantage of taking advantage of creating higher quality services, therefore going back and getting more revenue potentially out of my, for those next writes and such, and therefore generating more revenue. That's it. Questions? Yeah.
If you have a question, let me bring it
Sorry.
back to you because we need to get your question on video.
Oh, you need my answers on video. That's the real thing. Yep.
What's driving the and the storyline? The storyline's
Oh,
coming up.
okay, yeah. So if we go back, so what's driving that? There, here we go. So what's driving that storyline is essentially as we go into the production setup, those are essentially metadata tags. So what we've done in the Dreamcatcher cluster is we're able to enter, as content coming in, this metadata very easily, whether it's through a touch interface and everything else. And what this essentially does, it allows me to start filtering any clips that I'm creating, leveraging those metadata components. So I'm starting to quickly, so I click on that and now I get all the clips that match those characteristics of metadata so that I can quickly either clip them and put them as a highlight package or take them directly to air, right? So it's basically a quick template. And you essentially do that in your prepping. So when you get into it, you have the hour prep. These are storylines we're interested in. Here are the tags that we're going to follow for that storyline. These are the graphics I'm going to use and such. So you're preparing everything and you're kind of creating a template so that when you get to the production, really it's quick access to those elements and automating creation of those.
Any other questions?
So it looked like the front end was a bunch of dream catchers going into, you're aggregating multiple streams for an at-home dark fiber connectivity?
So there's a couple things. So in one sense, it's kind of approaching for those facilities like a Sky, who are, in one sense, already capturing all the content. Okay, so that would be the ingest component of the service. So you're collecting all the feeds. So for example, they may be bringing 30 different feeds for the second tier English League and the third tier during that weekend. And what they want to do is they have to publish that for the wild or the world feed. So those are being ingested already. What this does is says, well, instead of having yet another device in my system to now do this production, I add this as a software onto my cluster to take advantage of all those feeds coming in.
Right. So the infrastructure is already in place, and you're getting a third screen experience from a low cost utilizing the existing assets.
Exactly.
So you're not proposing this be a standalone for a second tier market?
At this point, no, because I think that the fact is it depends on that budget of that second tier, okay? Where we find the value add here is really going to be on those multiple streams and multiple channels, right? That's really where this approach is going to be really economical.
And what's the storage capacity? Is that all just scalable?
It's all scalable. It's all scalable.
And my not knowledge of the Dreamcatcher system, but like with the Bravo, so I'm literally just hooking up a secondary screen. Is there, can you use any kind of MIDI control surface, or what are you using to control this, or is that just touchscreen?
That's all touchscreen.
Is there ability to hook up?
Sorry?
Is there ability to hook up like MIDI control or any kind of that kind of stuff?
There's elements there, yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Like for audio, for instance, that's one of the problems
So,
I have with some things.
and
is being
that's
able to
actually
adjust
one of the
faders.
things that we're finding as, what's interesting about this market right now is we're at the infancy, because it is that struggle of being able to do all those elements under one hood, right? And one of the challenges is we almost got the video component done, but the audio seems to always lag behind it, right? And what we're starting to see now is, yes, we love this. However, we want to see an audio board beside it because we still have to be able to have those controls. That's great. However, now you're getting yourself back into this, I need to have a specialized person and everything else. So it's that fine line of understanding, well, what if I pre-set up some of those settings and then apply it, right? So there's going to be a little bit of pre-planning that goes in this sense, and then going forward, that's why we look at it as, there's a different way of saying, hey, I understand you want those controls, but in some sense, you already know what's coming in once you've faxed all the signals, so you can make those adjustments and give controls, make changes when you need to, rather than have it always there.
I just want faders. That's
Yeah,
it. Nothing
everyone
else.
wants faders. That's right. I know they love the faders. I know. But
All right.
what's interesting? Sorry, one thing is that that's the other element, is that what you're starting to see now is the audience that you're trying to gauge with this is going to be those that are going to be more adapt to the touch interfaces. And I've seen this with master control switchers and everything else, is I want that button. I want to know that happens. But now, well, the audience or the pool that you're drawing from is more afraid of those hard buttons because they feel that those are specially controls, whereas this one seems like it's like a video game. It's something I can do on my phone. Therefore, I am more adapt to pick up on here.
You have a couple more questions here?
Yep.
Do you have like different personas that you could log into so that you could have one person is running audio and they've got their interface and then somebody else has got that?
Exactly, and that's the beauty of this, is that it's fully customizable. So I can say for that one event, if I go back here, in this case, for that one event, I'm going to create the environment that it's only be controlled by that one individual. Whereas if I go to the next one, I'm now going to take that and separate that, add on an audio mixer component to that, and that'll be that personality, all working under the same environment.
All right, we got another question.
Yep.
So is there a way in this model for talkback to talent to work?
Yep. So part of that is carrying intercom over IP, all right? So there's elements that will allow you to do that right now. So you can go over IP to take that back and forth. So there is going to be, that's part of the extra feature sets of whether I have on-site commentary, how do I bring that back, or a booth next to me. So that is part of the overall production. Production isn't just, it's checking off all those boxes. Yeah.
Dumb question. Is
No such
that
thing.
comm interface, is that an Evertz technology, or are you interfacing with some other comm systems?
Right now, interfacing with any comm system. It's essentially right now what we've got is a couple different ways of doing that today. You can do comms over fiber as one option. What we're starting to see now is a migration to using IP, so AS67 or Ravina or Dante as some of those elements. So yeah, that's where we're starting to see how to carry that. And that's not just the intercom, but also audio itself.
Could you give an example of how this works with the Adobe Creative Cloud?
So the Adobe Creative Cloud allows us to, so part of this is that one of them is the graphic elements, so I can bring in the Adobe Premiere elements to create my graphics, fit that into the workflow. The second is the packages or highlight packages I create get exported right into video editors seamlessly. So we take the project files, everything goes in, and then I can drop that back and make that available immediately after.
So on the Creative Cloud, I'll follow up on that. Is that a live integration, or is it just elements being imported?
It can be both. It can be a growing file, or it can be a offload, edit, and bring back.
Any other questions? All right.
Again, the premise is fitting into existing workflows.
All right. Well, guys, thank you so much for being here at Streaming Media West, the Sports Streaming Summit. That was an amazing presentation.
Thank you.
We appreciate your support, and we appreciate you guys being here with us today. If you get a survey, we'd love to know what you liked, what you didn't like, things you'd like to see for next year, because that's how these always get better and stay relevant, is feedback from the attendees. So if you do get a survey, make sure you fill it out and give us some valuable feedback. I'm Philip Nelson, co-chair of this track, and I really do appreciate you guys supporting us, and hope you have a great remainder of your time here in Huntington Beach. Thank you very much.